going maybe right on time, so it looks like there's a great crowd here, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. There's a lot of interest around the Construct API, and looks like City of Tacoma is doing some really good stuff with it. So this is Nathan Connors, and he's the management analyst for Tacoma, Washington. And he's worked with the city for a little over a year now. He's part of the Accelarate implementation or innovation team. Thank you, welcome aboard. Oh wait, we just established it's their Accelarate innovation team. Their primary responsibilities of maintaining Accelarate and other technology related to improving the department. He graduated with a degree in information technology and a degree in digital design, which he gets to be utilized for the city every day. So thank you. Please, everyone, welcome Nathan.
Everyone hear me? Good. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Nathan Connors, and this trip to Accelarate is actually a pretty big deal for me. Getting here was my first time ever on an airplane, and it was a big flight. I'm all the way from Washington State, so my first flight was basically the entirety of the United States. Also, this is my first time ever presenting in front of a group professionally like this. So I'm going to be a bit nervous. I'm going to try as hard as I can not to talk too fast, but if I do start talking too fast, you can just start booing loudly. It won't help at all, but if you're lucky, you might see a grown man start crying on stage. With that, my name is Nathan Connors, and I'm with the City of Tacoma, Washington. And I'm here today to talk to you about how we improved our customer experience by utilizing SL's Construct APIs. Alright, in this presentation, I'm going to start off by giving a brief introduction to Tacoma, how we operate, and how we utilize Accelarate. But then I'll dive into the majority of the presentation. It'll be talking about the customer service issues that we're experiencing and applications that we created to improve our customer experience, which are Tracker and the Queue Monitor. After doing a deep dive into these applications, I'll finish off the presentation by talking about some upcoming projects that we have, as well as some things we can do with the data that we've accumulated through Tracker. So to start off, Tacoma has a population of over 200,000, which makes us the third largest city in Washington behind Spokane and Seattle. We're known for things like Denali Pickle, Mars Candy Bar, and home of Roca, and we're also home of the famous Dave Chihuly's Glass Museum. In my opinion, one of the more iconic landmarks in Tacoma is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, or you may know it as the Galloping Gertie, or that famous wall bridge you may have seen in the high school physics class, because it was catching a wind through the Tacoma Narrows. It's obviously been rebuilt since then, so now it only does that on Friday nights. So I work for the Planning and Development Services Department, which provides a lot of services for the community, ranging from building, site, and land use permitting to things like historic preservation review and pre-construction consultations. And in 2016, we had launched the Accelarate Land Management module, as well as the Accelarate Citizen Access, with the mindset that we would manage all functionality within the department. So myself and Jennifer Ward and Casey Jamrock, we comprise of a team called the Innovation Team, or the I-Team for short. And we were established during the launch of Accelarate to manage all Accelarate functions and any related technologies. It's important to note we are not a segment of IT. We're an embedded group within the Planning and Development Department, which gives us a lot of freedom to adapt Accelarate to our needs, and we've been able to make a lot of cool stuff because of this. Ooh, okay, I know it's obvious at this point, but I took public speaking in college. I had a method for getting through my presentation smoothly, though, and that method was called winging it. And my intention was to come here and wing it for you today, but my boss Jennifer here, she said, when you go to Accelarate, you have to present and you got to talk about facts and you got to talk about information, and that winging it is unprofessional. So she was nice enough to give me a list of topics she wants me to talk about, so I'm going to break down the issues that we were experiencing with customer service. So when we launched Accelarate, it was already a huge improvement to our customer service because we had things like the online citizen access, and we were much more transparent in our permitting process. But we still needed a way to address our over 7,500 customers that would come into the office to see subject experts every year. So at the time, we were either using pen and paper or an application called Liquid Office to manage customers coming in, and it didn't really fit the department needs. We were lacking a lot of features that would be helpful, such there was no efficient way for handing off customers between subject groups. And then what this means is we have a lot of different, like, we have the building review group, and we have the site review group, and say a customer needed to see 2 that day, we had no system in place where they could basically pass the customer off. So the only real way to do it was a direct email, which was very inefficient and ineffective. And in addition to this, the staff that would help customers actually spanned 5 different floors of our 15-story municipal building. So email was really the only way. And for a while, we implemented pagers, but no one really liked that solution, so we needed another solution. Customers were also told conflicting information, and this is due to if a customer did end up seeing multiple subject groups that day, there was no note system in place, so they didn't know what the customer was told earlier. So the customer committee would either be told slightly different information or completely conflicting information, which caused a lot of confusion. And then we also had no system in place for tracking time. So we had no way for staff to see how much time staff was spending with customers, and we couldn't make educated business decisions based on these, and we needed to be able to track time. We also had customer frustration knowing that there's a waiting status in line. And this is due because we do have multiple subject groups. If a customer did come in for the building group, and then another customer came in for the site group, but got served first, that first customer would obviously be angry because we had no clear indicator that there was actually different lines of service. Because of all these issues, we started putting out RFPs and trying to discover other queuing systems, but most of them were either really expensive or too excessive, and we needed something much more customized to our department needs. So the I team, we started discovering the Accelarate construct APIs, and we decided to come up with our own solution. And that solution is Tracker. Tracker is an internal web application built in JavaScript that utilizes Accelarate's construct APIs to allow you to create records and update workflows without even going into the City platform. In addition to Tracker, we made a customer-facing version of Tracker, basically, and we call it Queue Monitor. It also does utilize the construct API, but it's obviously for customers to see their waiting status. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a deeper dive into Tracker. And so, again, Tracker is an internal web application built in JavaScript. And we call it Tracker because the idea is that we're tracking down the customers, finding out all the information about them, sniffing them out. Obviously, we don't tell the customers that because it would freak them out. But regardless, we've also adopted the hunting dog as our Tracker icon, with each version of Tracker being a different dog. So we've gone through Doberman, German Shepherd, and the current version 3 of Tracker is a Basset Hound. And I know some of you are dog people and might realize not all of those are hunting dogs, and you'd be correct. Okay, so this is a snapshot of what Tracker looks like throughout the day. Each of these cards that you see here represents both a customer that comes into the office as well as a record inside the cell. All the cards can be clicked to expand or collapse to show or hide more information about that customer, and show or hide more information about that customer. And we built Tracker in a 3-column layout to easily show the workflow. And I'll explain what that means deeper in just a minute here, but basically the left column is the reception column, or the routing, where the routing of the customer occurs. And the middle column is the review column, which is where all the subject group's interactions with the customers occur. And then the target column is obviously when the customer's left. Tracker is also a mobile-friendly application. What this means is staff have the ability to see Tracker from their phones from anywhere on the network. And we also have implemented automatic staff notifications. So once in the customer card is in the middle column and routed to that department, they'll get automatic emails indicating that the customer's in the office. So we have multiple ways to now have communication with all the subject groups. So also, Trackers, the data you see here gets refreshed every minute, every 60 seconds. And we're pulling that data from Accelarate. I'll get a little deeper into what that means in a minute here. But basically, every minute, it automatically refreshes so that staff can see new records coming in without the need of reloading the page over and over again. And all the records you see here are only records from that day. So you're not going to end up seeing thousands over like a week period or whatever. But we do have a feature. I'm not going to show it off, but there's a calendar feature. So if there ever was a need to go back, we could look into Tracker and see previous interactions. So that was just kind of the design of it, but I want to get deeper into how it works. And this is a card that you can see in that left reception column when a customer comes into the office. So the staff member at reception would handle all the basic intake of the customer, and open one of these cards, they get their name, get the reason for the customer being in the office that day. They'll also get their address, which does have integrated GIS lookup, so right away they'll know if there's a code case on a parcel. And then they'll select which departments that the customer needs to see that day. Now, once that create button has been pressed, all this data will be sent to Accelarate and a new record will be created. So in this case, you'll see all the same basic information, name, description, and address at the summary tab in Accelarate, but then you'll actually see the workflow of that record activated based on the choices of the departments. So in this case, you would see the building review tasks and the site development review tasks are active tasks for this customer. So once this data gets sent to Accelarate, we then get a response. We start getting more data back from Accelarate, such as the record number. And the card physically moves from the left reception column, gets moved to the center column like you see here. And as you can see, there's a lot more information on the card. You start seeing the record number again. It might be hard for some people to see, but there's a little clock symbol and a truck symbol. And that's our way of indicating what is active workflow on this for this customer. So in this case, we know the customer is waiting for the site development code. Then you have all the same basic information, and now you're seeing something new, which is the workflow history. And in tracker terms, that means all the interactions that the customer has had that day and all the notes that received. So, say a site did grab this card and was about to help the customer, what they would do is they would click that check box on the top right, and that's our way of saying checking in the customer. And then it morphs the card and adds a few more elements. And as you can see, the symbol changes to a handshake symbol, and that's our quick way of showing that the customer is with that subject group. But now you're also seeing something new, which is a text input and a time input. This allows staff to put in the notes of whatever interaction that they had with that customer, and the time that they spent with that customer, and when they press the check mark again, this data will be sent to Accelarate, and it will status that workflow step with these notes. So it means all of this data will be stored in Accelarate, and that's what this card really is trying to show you here, is how much we're really taking from Accelarate and putting into a single card. Obviously, you're seeing information from the summary card, all the basic information, and you're seeing the active workflow based on the icons on top, but you're also seeing the workflow history, which is, again, all the interactions that we have. And the workflow history on the cards themselves continue to generate more. So if the customer ends up being in there and seeing a bunch of different subject groups, it's really easy to see what this customer's been through that day. Okay, so that's Tracker, and that's how it works. That's a little bit how it works. But this presentation has to go a little bit longer, so I needed to find something to talk about. But realistically, I want to get into how the process of Tracker works. And I think to understand the process, it's good to know how we got to where we are and how we developed where we got to. So I'm just going to briefly go over the previous versions of Tracker. So this is version 1 of Tracker. This is, in our eyes, it's really more of a guinea pig project, seeing what we could do with the construct APIs. Right off the bat, we learned we could do things like create records and update workflows. We even, for this version of Tracker, added things like integrated GIS lookup. We were into making a cool application that was usable, but it wasn't very user-friendly. It required multiple pages to operate. It required a lot of manual input. And so on one page, you create the records, and then on another page is the dashboard. So that's where the customer records are. And it requires staff to keep manually reloading the page to see if the customer came in. So it was a great idea, but we needed to push it further. So taking what we learned from version 1 by utilizing the APIs, we created version 2 of Tracker. And version 2 of Tracker is really where we sort of branded it as its own application. It's where we adopted the hunting dog, and it's where we also adopted that 3-column layout to try to show the workflow of the customer. It's a little bit different though. In the left column, you can see it's the intake of the customer. And also, just a side note, at this time you only had the ability to select one department. And then once the card has been created, it will get moved to the center existing column where the customer card will stay until it is eventually departed. In this version of Tracker, we also had features such as mobile friendly. So already in version 2, it was, staff had the ability to see if the customer was in the office from anywhere on the network. So version 2 is actually went over really well. A lot of staff used it for a long period of time. But after prolonged use, we started getting a lot more input from staff about things that needed to change. And you always get the normal things like more features, more additions, and things like that. But we actually started learning it was not just a feature thing, it was also a process thing. We weren't thinking about it in a process way. And after working with staff, we decided to draw out what the process looks like based off this application. And drawing it out, it started to look like a mess to us. So a customer would come into the office, and reception would handle all the basic intake of that customer, and then route the customer to a selected subject group. At that point, the subject group could either depart the customer or reroute the customer to another subject group. What this meant is it was sort of a wild west. There was times when we actually lost where that customer was because there was no clear direction on where that customer was supposed to be next. And this kind of like input from the staff, we couldn't have discovered this on its own, so it's almost like having the application out there working pushed us to improve the process. So looking at it, we drew out what we want our process to look like. Now, in our perfect process, in our ideal process, a customer would walk into the office. Again, reception would handle all the basic intake of the customer, would get all the basic information, and then route the customer to one or many subject groups. After that stage, once all the subject groups have finished speaking with the customer will always be routed back to reception. What this means is reception will act as a sort of air traffic controller, so they're always handling the routing of the customer, which meant a very clean workflow on our end. And at that point, the customer could either be departed or rerouted to another subject. So taking that process, that's how we developed version 3 and started looking at the process of the customer experience. So it might be a little bit hard to see, but this is an example of a car that actually already went through the intake, went through the review, but now it's back in reception. You can see it says waiting for 37 minutes because it's already been in the system working for a while. And you also see some more options. They can now reroute it to another department or depart the customer. And they can also add notes at this point. So I know I just kind of threw a lot at you, so I'm just going to quickly reiterate the differences between versions. And so again, version 1, more of a guinea pig project, seeing what we could accomplish with the Construct APIs, and we learned a lot. Learned we could create records, update workflows, but it wasn't a very good user experience. So we took what we learned and we developed, we started creating a real application. We call it a real application in version 2, when it really started to be usable for the staff, started to be, create a process out of it. And this is also when we added features such as mobile friendly and things like that. But because of prolonged use on version 2, that's when we learned that it was a process issue, not necessarily a feature issue. And looking at the process, that's how we developed version 3 of Tracker, where we really structured that workflow. And I didn't say that last slide, but at version 3 is also where we added things like automatic staff notification. So in addition to the mobile friendly, we now have a lot of ways for staff to always know if customers in the office. Okay, so now the real question, like that's the application, that's how it works. But the real question, does it work for us? And I would say yes. Oh, that was okay. Yeah, it's okay. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, so things like automatic staff notification, mobile friendly, again, they have improved the communication with staff. It's a lot easier for staff to know the customers in. And that's pretty obvious, but then there's a lot of other features. The fact that all these cars that we created in Tracker are stored in Accelarate means we can do things like report on it. We can start seeing, we can look people up by address and see all their records, all their walk-in records and associate it. We can also relate these records to things like building permits. So if they have their building permit, they can see all their walk-in records and they're related to record tab, which means that they can easily go in and see what this customer's been told anytime they've been in the office. There's also been a lot of time savings, and a lot of this is to do with the workflow history easily shown. Staff don't have to repeat the same information to a customer because they know what's been said to them. So now we only need to move forward and keep adding on to what the customer needs. And then less customer wait time is really a response from the process that we created. Really looking at like handling the customer experience, not worrying, so we don't have to worry about those lost customer moments anymore, and really look at the structured workflow and how to improve our speed and efficiency. So, as I said, Tracker's an internal web application, meaning only staff have access to that, so customers can't see, their waiting status or anything like that. So we needed to create something that also showed customers their waiting status, and we developed an application called Queue Monitor, which also does utilize the Sales Construct API, but instead of the ability to create records, it just pulls records. We've adopted the monitor as Queue Monitor's logo because we ran out of creativity after Tracker. So this is actually a snapshot of our lobby. On the left over here, that's our reception. So that's where the customer go up and they'll speak to reception and get routed. And this is kind of like shot in the sea from sitting in the lobby. So you can see big orange arrow points to where the queue monitor sits up on the wall. So it's really easy for customers to see from anywhere in our lobby their waiting status. And this is a close-up of the queue monitor. There's just 4 quick points I want to talk about. The one, that's where really the Accelarate construct API's call is occurring. That's pulling the records that you see in that middle review column in Tracker, but instead of showing them all the same information, it just divides it up by which group they're waiting for and shows their name. So now we don't have that confusion where people didn't know their status line, what line they were waiting for. So now it's very clear. The 2 here is a banner image thing that we put announcements, things we want customers to know. It's a slideshow, things like that. And then 3 is a rolling text that we put office hours and things like website information. And I'm not going to show it today because I think I'm pretty good on time right now. But 2 and 3 is we made a dashboard so anybody can edit them. So if any customer, any staff member wants to change an image or change the text, we made it a really easy dashboard to use. And then we do have live TV playing to try to keep people at least a little bit entertained in a permitting office. Okay, so those are the applications that we built, but the question is, has it improved our customer experience? So I'm going to go back on those the list that I gave you before and talk about how we had solved our issues. We no longer have to deal with inefficient customer management tools like pen and paper for Liquid Office because we made our own. And our own application, we have been able to solve things like efficiently handing off customers. Having reception as that air traffic controller has allowed a really easy passing off of customers, so it's really, there's always no more confusion and triggering. And because of the mobile-friendly version and the automatic staff notifications, now the staff spanning many floors can help know if customers in the office. And kind of a cool story about that is even staff outside of the office can help. We had a story recently where a staff member was out of the office and got a notification that a customer was in, and they were able to call in and assist the customer over the phone because they knew that Tracker automatically sent a notification that there was a customer waiting for it. And then there's no more conflict of information. Customers aren't told conflicting information on their visits because now staff can see the notes that were said before, so you're not going to have those moments where they're said and told slightly different things because they know what was said, and now they can just keep moving forward. And now since all this is stored in Accelarate, we can easily make crystal reports and start organizing it by staff, by subject group, and we can start making business decisions on how to better fit our customer needs. And the queue monitor is our response to customers not knowing their waiting status. It clearly shows customers where they're waiting, and it's easy for them to find that information. And we no longer need to worry about other applications because we built our own. If we want to make a change to Tracker, we will. We can do that pretty fast, and we can continue to develop and add features based off our staff needs. So a lot of I showed you a little bit how we learned through Tracker iterations and kind of developed it to where it is, but we actually learned a lot of things just on the current version of Tracker that we never experienced before. I'm just going to quickly go over those. So, yeah, that's right. So this is actually kind of a funny story. So I told you every minute that Tracker pulls the records from a cell. And I didn't really get deep into it, but basically what it does now is it pulls just the record numbers. And when you expand it, it will pull the rest of the record information. And this is actually, that wasn't how it was when we started version 3. What happened was we were pulling all of that data every minute to every flight. And Accelarate actually shut us down. They stopped it. We were making too many calls to the construct API, and it was inefficient programming, but we didn't really know that. And so taking that kind of methodology, and we started trying to build Tracker to be much more efficient. So now, again, the clients pull just the record numbers, and when they click to expand, that's when it's actually physically doing that information call to Accelarate. So it's greatly improved the performance. And I already kind of talked about staff improving our process, version 3 of Tracker, but this is actually really important because we're kind of the nerds in the back room. We don't interact with customers on a daily basis, so we need those staff that use these applications to tell us like what works and what doesn't work. We had no idea customers were getting lost in the system until they told us. So the staff input has been invaluable, and this is actually a friend of ours, Noah. He's one of those people that would always be at the reception desk, and it was input from him and many others that we learned that having reception as that air traffic controller is a really smart system. And then not all solutions work for all scenarios is really an indicator. I didn't explicitly say it before, but I'm sure most of you picked up. Everything that you saw that Tracker did can be done directly in Accelarate. You can go into Accelarate, you can create a record, you can activate a workflow, you can manage the customer experience directly in Accelarate. But it's not a very good experience for the staff. We needed something that would be easy to use to manage the customer experience to make everyone's lives easier. So that's why we built Tracker. We built it for a need for the department. So that is my project, or that's what I wanted to show you today. But I want to talk about some upcoming things we're also talking about. We're going to continue expanding what we're doing with the Construct APIs and other things. So I just want to briefly talk about that. I already said this a few times, but because all of this data is stored inside of Accelarate, we can report on it very easily. We can grab the hours that customers are spending in the office. We can grab the amount of time staff is spending with customers, and we can start making business decisions based off this, and we can help our customers even further. And now what we're doing right now, actually, it's pretty far along, is we're pushing Tracker to a Node application. And I won't get too deep into that, but basically Node is a client-side application, which means, I was telling you how each client is making that Accelarate API call. They're pulling that data from Accelarate. Our goal is, instead of a client doing it, the server will do it instead. So the server will pull the data, and instead the clients interact with that server. What this means is it would greatly improve the efficiency. So we wouldn't have things like, so instead of like 50 calls for a person for all records, we'd have one call. It would be very, very clean, and it would be very efficient. And we continue to develop apps with that kind of methodology. In addition to that, we're also adding things like a chat feature in Tracker, so it's easy to communicate between staff, so you don't need an email or anything. And we're also, it's a little tricky, but we're also trying to do things like embedded metrics, so you can see average customer wait time and things like that for the day. So there's a lot of features. Also things like multiple addressing is a big one that's been a request. So we're in the overhaul stage right now. And then finally, there's been talk about building a time tracking application. And obviously you can already track time with Tracker, that's the amount of time staff are spending with customers, and you can already track time when they status workflows inside of Accelarate. But we want a way of tracking other time. And it's been a big topic right now, and it's been thrown around. It's kind of similar fashion to the queuing systems. We've put out, I don't think we've done an RFP, but we've been looking at alternative solutions, and nothing really is fitting our needs. So it might come down to us building it, and we're kind of excited. We'll see where it goes. But so that's my presentation. And if you want to email any three of us, you can email Tacoma@citytacoma.org. We'll all three get that, or you can contact me directly. Are there any questions or concerns? Yes.
So